about counting our blessings. You know, and Eric Butterworth, who I always say this when I talk about him, is I believe he was the greatest New Thought teacher in our generation. And he writes about gratitude a lot. And he said, you know, Thanksgiving isn't a reactionary emotion, it's a causative energy. And so what he was saying, you know, it's not something where we just react when somebody does something for us and we say, gee, thank you, you know, or we're really grateful. He's saying it's a way of being, it's a way of living. And when we live and walk with you know, what Ernest Holmes said, an attitude of gratitude, it brings more and more into our life. And you know, we don't give thanks to God for God's purpose. You know, God couldn't really care less if we were doing that. And I was thinking, you know, like if you're Catholic, when you go through Lent and you give up something, you know, we're not doing that. God doesn't care if you give up chocolate for Lent or smoking or whatever, you know, people give up. It's for us. It's a tool for us to develop a consciousness that brings us closer to spirit. It's a grateful mind will attract more gratitude. And I read something this week, and it really touched me because it was something that I've done many times. It was by a young girl who, one of the things that she really loved about Christmas, I bet you Ellie and Joe could relate to this too. And one of the things she loved about it was there was one day, one special day that she would spend with her dad all day. They would go into Manhattan and they'd go, she was able to stay up late, but they would go see the tree at Rockefeller Center. You know, every New Yorker does that at some point. And then she and her dad would go to every single store on Fifth Avenue. And I was an only child, and I remember doing that. They were both laughing, doing that. I would do it by myself. And it's still, it's so gorgeous on Fifth Avenue. Just as a kid, I would go into every store and just marvel at what they did, and that's what she did. And her father let her pick out the presents for the people that they were going to buy for. And she said one year she had the realization, and so she would really go through and do this, like think of each person and try to pick out the perfect gift for the amount of money her dad gave her. And she said one year she had the realization that she would never see them open the gifts, because all of the gifts that they were buying would either be mailed away or they'd be given all wrapped to the people, and they would be under their tree. And she realized that the blessing in it and the gratitude in it wasn't seeing the people open the gifts. It was that she had a lot of people in her life to love. You know, I thought that was really, really interesting that a young kid would get that. And I read something about a young girl named Margie Worrell, who said that her dad would talk to her about gratitude and tell her, you know, it isn't how much or how little we have, it's the story that you tell yourself. And that story can expand our capacity for joy. And you know, Butterworth said it's something we practice all the time. It's not a come and go thing, it's a way of life, a way of being. And even in the tough times, we can be grateful. It demands something mindfully. I'm going to tell a story about Beck and her birthday in a minute, but my car broke down this week, and I had to bring it in to the shop, and the bill was $587. And even then, you know, when I picked it up, I looked at it, and I really like our car, you know, and I was saying to Becky, we've had so many bills, we're gonna have to get rid of it soon. But I could still appreciate the fact, at least for a while, we had this beautiful red convertible that we were able to spend some time with. You know, it's really easy to get caught up in the negativity of life, and when we maybe don't think that we have enough. But it's a choice. It's a choice we need to make. and that we can recognize, because you and I shape the mindset that we bring to life. And Friday night, Becky and I, they had a table for all the people that were going to get up and do something at the installation. And so we were sitting with a whole group of ministers and their spouses. And one of them was we stayed at a hotel that was within a walking distance to the place, and she was telling us, oh, we have a condo right next to the hotel you're in. And we got into this big conversation, and she was saying to us, my husband and I have moved a lot. And I told him when we moved into this condo, I swear I'm dying. I'm dying here because I ain't ever moving again. And we were telling her about our move and how we moved from a really big place to a small place. And we said, you know, we both agree we have one more move in us. And she said, well, what are you visioning? And we said, well, you know, we haven't really thought about that. And she said, well, if you're not going to move for a couple of more years, think about this. You all have 2 years to vision what you want your next place to be, and you can create the perfect place for us. And you know, we talked about it later and said, yeah, maybe that's something we can do. So Mary Murray Shelton is a minister in California, and she was the dean of the School of Ministry when I went, and she's written a wonderful book. And she tells this story in the book about attending a luncheon for a group of women who had been featured on a radio show called Women of Courage. And she said at that luncheon, an African American woman stood up, and this is what she said to the group. She said, I am not a victim. There have only been blessings in my life, because in God, there is nothing but blessings. So the incest was a blessing. The beatings were a blessing. The rape was a blessing. They have helped make me the woman I am today, and I am proud to be who I am. And hopefully most of us don't have stories that are that dramatic, but I'm betting we all have stories where we've gone through really difficult times. And when we look back on that difficult times, they were the stepping stones that led to better times in our life. So we really can be grateful for those times too. Scott Peck wrote, everything that happens to us in life does so to make us more holy. Isn't that a different way to look at the difficulties in our life, that they're happening to us to make us more holy? So one of the earliest advocates of advocating a gratitude practice was the Dutch philosopher Rabbi Baruch Spinoza. And when he wrote, he said that each day for a month, and I was reading, when I read this again this week, I thought, even if we did it, Thanksgiving is Thursday, even if we just did this Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and Thursday this week, he said each day, ask yourself the following questions. Who or what inspired me today? Who or what inspired me today? What brought me happiness today? What brought me comfort and deep peace today? He said if you do that, it helps us find more meaning and more joy in our life, and it would lead to profound transformations in our life. You know, I thought about it because Becky's birthday was Wednesday, and for weeks we had a plan. She had this restaurant that she really loves and wanted to go out to, and we had this, it was for weeks, and I had car problems, and so Wednesday my car was in the shop and we couldn't go out because there was no way for, well, I guess there was a way, but we weren't gonna do it because I knew it was gonna be an expensive job, so we couldn't go. And so here we are, instead of being at this really nice restaurant that's on the water and enjoying this great meal. We're sitting at home in our bathrobes, having a glass of wine and pizza that we had to call in. And I felt really terrible. And I said to Becky, oh God, I am so sorry. I know how much you were looking forward to this. I'm really sorry. And she just looked at me, she smiled. She said, you know, don't be sorry for me. She said, you know, I'm sitting here with the person I love, having a glass of wine and some pizza, and we're gonna do it Saturday night. So it's all good, it's all fine. She was able to be really grateful even in that moment. And to tell you, we were starting to tell Carol before, we went out last night and we both agreed we had the best Italian meal we have had in years. So it really, you know, it really works out. I read something by a fellow named Mike Robbins this week who hailed a cab to go to the airport. And it was obvious to him that the cab driver was from somewhere else other than the US. So he asked the cab driver, where are you from? And the cab driver said, Ethiopia. And I've been here 20 years, and he was really proud. He said, and I'm a citizen, and my wife is a citizen, and my son is a citizen. You know, he's so proud to be an American. So Mike said to him, so let me ask you a question. From the perspective of somebody who wasn't born in this country, what do you think of American culture? And when he asked him that question, they were in the airport. The cab driver pulled over to the side of the road and turned his car off. And he turned around and he said, can I tell you the truth? And Mike said, sure you can. And he said, I think that the people in this country act like a bunch of spoiled brats. And Mike said to him, why? And the cab driver simply said to him, I was born in Ethiopia. Every day in America is a good day. Isn't that interesting? You know, our culture has some people anyway, an obsession with negativity, and it's easy to get caught up with what's not working rather than appreciating what is working. And again, you know, gratitude, it's not just some concept out here, it's a practice. Again, I said this twice before, it's a way of living and a way of being, and the more consistent we are with it, the more gratitude we'll receive in our life. And gratitude can also, I read they've done some studies that people that have this attitude of gratitude, they have better health, they have better moods, they're more productive, and they have better relationships. So I want to share with you a story about that. So we all know who Erma Bombeck is. And so Erma, see, people are smiling, she's a humorist. And actually she wrote some really fabulous, make you cry, serious stuff too. But this article that I read, she had cancer. Erma Bombeck had cancer. And she wrote that initially she handled it with her typical humor. Everything was okay. She went in with a very positive attitude. And that was all before the surgery. She said after the surgery, reality started to set in to her. And so every time she got undressed and took a shower, she would cry. And she would think to herself, my beach days are over. I can never go to the beach again. And she could barely look at herself in the mirror. And she got really cranky. And she said at one point, she snapped at her husband and she said to him, you just don't get it, do you? This isn't some little scar from a wart that I had taken care of. So that became her attitude. And she went to the doctor and he picked up on the attitude and he said, what's going on with you? And she said to him, she said, I'm just grumbling about this disfiguring surgery that I had, and I'm finding it really difficult to live with it. And he said, I think it's time for you should be glad you're alive speech. And so he said to her, you're one of the lucky ones. You came for a checkup every year. we caught yours when it was really small. It wasn't in your lymph nodes. You're clean. You should really be grateful, because if all of that hadn't happened, you wouldn't be sitting here with me. And so then she wrote, every time I forget to feel grateful, I hear the voice of an 8-year-old named Christian who had cancer of the nervous system. When they asked her what she wanted for her birthday, she thought long and hard. And then she said, I don't know. I have 2 sticker books and I have a Cabbage Patch doll. I have everything. And Erma Bombeck said, the kid was right. You know, it's how we look at life. So I read something by a lady named Ton Lontok who does something about what Rabbi Spinoza said. She said what she tries to do every evening, she asks herself, what inspired me, before she goes to sleep, what inspired me today? What did I take for granted? What advantages have I received? Who has supported me along the way today? You know, it's a way of really looking at your life. And I was thinking every day, you know, I kind of said this before, I try to do this before I get out of bed. Some days I don't, and at night, and I try a couple of times during the day. I try to give thanks just for my life. You know, just to say thank you for letting me be here at this time and have that woman in my life. You know, and what else is there that cannot be okay after that? You know, we're all here. We're having relationships. We're loving. We're cared for. What more do we need? And another rabbi that I read, his name is Zelit Plishkin, said, you know, it's really easy to lack gratitude because we take so many things for granted. So he said, because we get used to them, you know. So he said, choose to take a day and not take anything for granted. Now, I'm going to tell you what he said to do. And I honestly have never done it for a whole day, but I have done it for an hour or so. And I did it this morning after I was looking at my notes at home. He said, look at everything that you have as if you're seeing it for the first time. Look at all the stuff that you own as if you just bought it or just received it, and then see how you feel. And I just did it for a couple of minutes this morning. I was looking at my notes and I was thinking, boy, I really like this couch. That I wanted a leather couch for years. And we've had one, and it's kind of old now. But I remember when we first got it, I thought, oh wow, for years I wanted a leather couch. And we have one. And I looked at our TV, and I remembered, you know, when we moved we got it when we moved to Phoenix, and it's old, you know, it's not a smart TV. But our TV had gone when we lived in Northern California, and we had to literally take it to the dump. And when we moved into this place in Phoenix, I wanted to get a bigger TV. And there was this big, the person that had owned the house before made this big stand, and there was a big opening. And I asked the realtor, what's that? And she said, he built that for his wife. It fits a 48-inch TV perfectly. And I thought, yes, we're getting a 48-inch, you know, and just remembering that is really so easy to forget that stuff, you know, with a car, like I said, you know, she picked out a red convertible. I couldn't believe it, you know, and now it's kind of not in such great shape, but just to go back, we really do have so much to be grateful for. And Kent Norborn is one of my favorite authors, and he's written a bunch of books, and this one is called Small Graces. And in the book, he in one of the chapters, he said, I just got news that one of my good friends died today. He drowned. And nobody could figure it out because he was a good swimmer. And he said, I really, really liked him. He was a carpenter. And I used to think sometimes when I saw him, he's just like Joseph, Jesus' dad. And so that night, he went to tuck his son in to bed. And he said to his son, did you say your prayers? And he said, my son considers prayer private. So he kind of gave me this funny look. And he said, so I lied down next to him. And I hugged him. And my prayer was, thank you, God, for the gift of life. And then he wrote, we dream our lives in grand gestures, but we live our lives in small moments. We dream of the touch on the shoulder that will call us to greatness, to an act that would change the world. But the touches on our shoulder call us only to the small acts of everyday life, changing diapers, changing light bulbs, changing schedules. Far from being exalted beings, we seem to be prisoners of the ordinary, and we're haunted by the insignificance of our days. We must learn to see with other eyes. The world contains many paths, some exalted, some mundane. It is not our task to judge the worthiness of our path. It is our task to walk our path with worthiness. We have been blinded by the bright lights of heroes and saints. We must learn to trust the small light we are given and to value the light that we can shed onto the lives around us. For though we might not live a holy life, we live in a world alive with holy moments. We need only take time to bring these moments into the light. God bless you. Thank you for being here, and have a great week.